Global warming is a gradual increase in the overall temperature of the Earth's atmosphere, generally attributed to the greenhouse effect caused by increased levels of carbon dioxide, chlorofluorocarbons, and other pollutants. The greenhouse effect is the trapping of the sun's warmth in a planet's lower atmosphere due to the greater transparency of the atmosphere to visible radiation from the sun than to infrared radiation emitted from the planet's surface. Carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases are 4 different types of greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide enters the atmosphere through burning fossil fuels like coal, natural gas, and oil, solid waste, trees, and other biological materials, and it is also a result of certain chemical reactions. So how does humanity contribute to carbon dioxide emissions? The main human activity that emits CO2 is the combustion of fossil fuels. In 2019, the combustion of fossil fuels to transport people and goods resulted in 35% of U.S. CO2 emissions and 28% of total greenhouse gas emissions. This is the largest source of CO2 emissions. The combustion of fossil fuels in 2019 used to generate electricity resulted in 31% of the total U.S. CO2 emissions and 24% of the total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. This makes electricity the second largest source of CO2 emissions. In 2019, fossil fuel combustion in industrial processes generated about 16% of total U.S. CO2 emissions and about 13% of total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. Many industrial processes also use electricity, which indirectly results in CO2 emissions. Several processes also produce CO2 emissions through chemical reactions that do not involve combustion. A couple of these examples include the production of mineral products such as cement, the production of metals such as iron and steel, and the production of chemicals. Methane accounted for around 10% of all U.S. greenhouse gas emissions from human activity in 2019. Methane is emitted from energy, and the biggest sources of methane emissions are from industry, energy, agriculture, waste management activities, and land use. Energy and industry is the second leading cause of methane emissions in the U.S. Methane is the primary component of natural gas. Methane is emitted into the atmosphere during the production, processing, storage, transmission, and distribution of natural gas, and the production, refinement, transportation, and storage of crude oil. Coal mining is also a source of methane emissions. Agriculture is the number 1 source of methane emissions in the U.S. Cattle, pigs, sheep, and goats all produce methane during their normal digestive processes. Methane is also produced during the storage of animal manure in lagoons or holding tanks. With livestock and manure combined, agriculture becomes the number 1 source of methane emissions in the United States. Waste is the 3rd largest source of methane emissions in the United States. When waste decomposes in landfills, methane is generated. During the treatment of domestic and industrial wastewater, and from composting and anaerobic digestion, methane is also generated. Anaerobic digestion is the decomposition of sewage or other organic waste materials by anaerobic microorganisms. There are multiple natural sources that also emit methane. The largest natural source that emits methane are natural wetlands. Methane emissions come from the bacteria that decompose organic materials in the absence of oxygen. Smaller natural sources include termites, sediments, wildfires, volcanoes, and oceans. Nitrous oxide accounted for around 7% of all U.S. greenhouse gas emissions in 2019. Agriculture, industrial processes, and wastewater management also release nitrous oxide along with fuel combustion. Agriculture is also the leading source of nitrous oxide in the United States, accounting for around 75% of total nitrous oxide gas emissions. Various agricultural soil management activities, like the application of synthetic and organic fertilizers, other cropping activities, management of manure, and burning of agricultural residues, result in nitrous oxide emissions. Nitrous oxide is a byproduct of fuel combustion in mobile and stationary sources. When any fuel is burnt, part of the nitrogen that is in the fuel and surrounding air gets oxidized, creating nitrous oxide emissions. Nitrous oxide becomes a byproduct during the production of chemicals such as nitric acid. Nitric acid is used to make synthetic fertilizers and in production of fibers like nylon. Domestic wastewater during nitrification and denitrification of present nitrogen also generate nitrous oxide. It usually is in the form of urea, ammonia, and proteins. Used as substitutes for ozone-depleting substances like refrigerants, fluorinated gases are only emitted through human activity. Small atmospheric concentrations of fluorinated gases can have very large effects on global temperatures because they have a very high global warming potential relative to the other greenhouse gases. Fluorinated gases can last thousands of years in our atmosphere. The major source of emissions from hydrofluorocarbons is the use of refrigerants, like in both vehicle and building air conditioning. Besides refrigerants, aerosol propellants, foam-blowing agents, solvents, and fire retardants are also sources of hydrofluorocarbons. In industry work, perfluorocarbons are produced as a byproduct of aluminum production and are used in the manufacturing of semiconductors. Sulfur hexafluoride is used as an insulating gas in electrical transmission equipment, including circuit breakers. The global warming potential of sulfur hexafluoride is 22,800, making it the most potent greenhouse gas that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has evaluated. According to NASA, the vast majority of actively publishing climate scientists, 97%, agree that humans are causing global warming and climate change. Although the majority of climate scientists agree that humans are causing global warming, many people and businesses disagree. Many of these businesses are in the oil, gas, and coal industry. These companies know that without the use of these products, their companies will no longer be profitable or even exist. Many people disagree with global warming because where they live, their weather has not been much different. For example, in winter of 2009 through 2010, the people in England had an unusually cold winter. This led people to think that global warming was not true. During that same year, summer of 2010 brought Russia a record-breaking heat wave of 45.4 degrees Celsius or 113.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Should we trust companies whose only concern is large profits, or should we trust science, facts, and patterns? Now, I am not here to tell you what to believe, but I am here to say that the facts don't lie. The year 2020 tied with 2016 as the warmest year ever on record. In Europe, the month of July 2019 was declared the hottest month ever recorded on Earth. In July 2021, that record was broken by 0.02 of a degree. In the last century, all 50 states have become warmer, especially in the Northeast. The last 7 years have been the warmest 7 years on record, typifying the ongoing and dramatic warming trend, said GISS Director Gavin Schmidt. Whether 1 year is a record or not is not really that important. The important things are long-term trends. With these trends, and as the human impact on the climate increases, we have to expect that records will continue to be broken. By the year 2050, rising sea levels could impact at least 1 billion people. There is generally a large population around coastal areas, along with fragile wildlife habitats. Rising sea levels include flooding, increased intensity of storm surges, and major damage to coastal areas. Inland areas are also at risk because of the salt from the water can contaminate soil and groundwater. Coral bleaching happens when there are changes in water temperature. This causes the algae to leave coral reefs, turning them white and making them vulnerable to disease and death. Coral reefs support more species per unit area than any other marine environment, including about 4,000 species of fish, 800 species of hard corals, and hundreds of other species. Coral reef structures also buffer shorelines against 97% of the energy from waves, storms, and floods, helping to prevent loss of life, property damage, and erosion. Ice-free summers could become a reality because the Arctic is warming faster than anywhere else on Earth. Permafrost covers much of the Arctic. Permafrost is soil at or below the freezing point of the water for 2 or more years. Permafrost stores carbon from dead plants, and the cold prevents microbes from decomposing. 1.7 trillion tons of carbon is estimated to be what the Arctic permafrost holds, which is more than all human activity has generated since the start of the Industrial Revolution. As permafrost thaws, carbon dioxide and methane will be released. The Earth's warming puts a variety of species at risk. Crucial habitats may not be hospitable for certain animals or plants. Polar bears, some penguins, orange-spotted filefish, North Atlantic cod, the quiver tree are all at risk for extinction, with the golden toad already being extinct. Global warming can also negatively impact future generations. By the year 2040, it is estimated that 1 in 4 children will be living in areas with extreme water shortages, and by the year 2050, a further 24 million children are projected to be undernourished as a result of the climate crisis. One way we can help prevent the fast rate of global warming is to limit our use of fossil fuels. Instead of driving on your daily commute to work or school, try riding your bike, carpooling, or using public transportation at least 1 day a week. In your household, consider getting solar panels and check to see if your utilities offer renewable energy options. Solar panels derive energy from the sun and do not produce any harmful environmental effects. In your home, start looking at your household food waste and commit to cutting it from its current level. Only buy what you need and make sure you eat what you buy. Planting trees is another way to help with global warming. Trees absorb carbon dioxide, so planting more trees helps reduce the amount of carbon in our atmosphere. According to a study published in the Journal of Science, we could remove roughly 2/3 of human-made carbon by letting all forests regrow. Trees also offer more benefits than absorbing carbon dioxide from our atmosphere. Trees filter water and make our drinking supply cleaner and more reliable. Trees also clean our air, making it so we can breathe easier. Trees also give homes to all the wildlife we know and love.